The most dangerous sport in the world somehow became a billion-dollar business. Here's how. If you were driving a race car in 1903, you weren't really a driver. You were more like a test dummy with a death wish. It all started back in 1894 when a group of adventurous lunatics decided to race their cars from Paris to Rouen. No seatbelts, no helmets, no rules. Just open roads, dust clouds, and the hope you wouldn't flip over a hay cart or fall off a cliff. This wasn't racing for money, it was racing for bragging rights. And maybe your life. Back then, nobody even thought about championships. You just showed up, cranked your engine like a lawnmower, and hoped your car didn't explode halfway through the race. Spoiler alert, many of them did. Fast forward a few decades. It took 56 years for someone to say, hey, maybe we should make this a series. That moment came in 1950, when the first official Formula One World Championship kicked off. Now imagine this. You're Nino Farina, an Italian racing legend with nerves of steel and no fear of fiery death. You show up at Silverstone with an Alfa Romeo that looks more like a bullet than a car. And despite the chaos around you, you win. You become the first ever Formula One World Champion. History is made, and yes, Ferrari wasn't even in the picture yet. Back then, F1 wasn't some polished, multi-billion-dollar spectacle with drones and champagne. It was raw, brutal, and deadly. Drivers didn't have the luxury of crash barriers or medical teams on standby. You crash? That's probably the last race you'll ever do. The grid wasn't full of corporate empires either. It was passionate engineers working out of their garages, hoping their homemade machines didn't fall apart at 180 miles per hour. Aerodynamics? That was just a fancy word nobody cared about. Safety? Barely existed. You were gambling with your life every single lap. And yet, people lined up to race, not for fame, not for money, but for glory. One of the earliest titans of the sport was Juan Manuel Fangio, a soft-spoken Argentine who drove like a man possessed. When Mercedes-Benz rolled into F1 in 1954, they had a secret weapon. Fangio behind the wheel. He wasn't just fast, he was surgical. Calm under pressure, he made winning look easy, and with that, Mercedes dominated until everything came crashing down. Literally. At Le Mans in 1955, a Mercedes car hurtled into the crowd after a devastating accident. 84 people died, including the driver. The world was stunned. It was the worst disaster in motorsport history. Mercedes immediately pulled out of racing and wouldn't return for 34 years. Formula One had made headlines, but for all the wrong reasons. With Mercedes gone and the Italian teams wobbling, a new wave was coming, and it came from across the English Channel. If you were alive in the late 1950s, you would have watched the British roll into Formula One like a wrecking ball. They weren't here to copy old ideas. They were here to rewrite the rulebook. At the heart of this revolution was one genius idea: put the engine behind the driver. It sounds obvious now, but back then it was radical, and it worked. Suddenly, cars handled better, turned faster, and left the old front-engine machines in the dust. Ferrari and Alfa Romeo were scrambling to keep up. Teams like Cooper, BRM, and Lotus became household names. They weren't just winning races, they were reshaping the sport. In just a few years, British teams racked up titles like they were collecting stamps. If you were betting on a winner, chances are he was sitting in a mid-engine British-built rocket, and the drivers, they were fearless. 5 British champions emerged in a flash. Each one had their own style, some calm, some wild, all insanely quick. But Formula One wasn't just a European sport anymore. You started seeing races pop up in the United States, Canada, Mexico, and even South Africa. This wasn't just about winning laps, it was about winning global audiences. Formula One had officially gone worldwide. Meanwhile, 2 young names quietly entered the scene. If you blinked, you might have missed them: Bruce McLaren and Frank Williams. At the time, nobody could have predicted they'd one day build empires. They were just scrappy guys with a dream and a car. But trust this, those garage-born dreams would one day dominate entire decades. Then came the money problem. Flying cars across continents, paying drivers, fixing broken machines. F1 was expensive, and fans didn't care if your team ran out of cash. They just wanted speed and spectacle. So, the sport found a solution: sponsorships. Suddenly, race cars looked like NASCAR on steroids. Cigarette logos, beer brands, even rock bands. It was the birth of the sponsorship era. Sure, it looked messy, but it kept the engines running and the show going. And just when you thought F1 couldn't get crazier, 2 legends rolled into the spotlight. Niki Lauda, precise, disciplined, cold-blooded in the best way. James Hunt, a walking headline with a cigarette in one hand and champagne in the other. Their rivalry? Let's just say it made Shakespearean drama look tame. In 1976, Lauda was literally burned alive after a horrific crash at the Nürburgring. Most thought he'd never walk again, but just 6 weeks later, bandaged and scarred, he was back behind the wheel, racing for the championship. That's not racing. That's madness wrapped in bravery. And we haven't even hit the 1980s yet. If you were watching Formula One in the 1980s, you weren't just witnessing races, you were watching gladiators battle at 200 miles per hour. And right at the center of that storm, two names, Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. You could say it was logic versus lightning. Prost, nicknamed the Professor, was calm, calculated, and robotic in his precision. He didn't just drive, he dissected every corner like a math equation. Senna was the opposite, pure chaos, pure emotion. His style was wild, spiritual even. The man believed God guided his hands on the wheel. Whether you believe that or not, you couldn't look away. Now picture this, 1988, McLaren decides to put both of them in the same team. The best driver in the world, and the most dangerous one too. It was like strapping two lions into the same cage. They tore into each other, on and off the track. In back-to-back years, the championship came down to Japan, and in both races, the winner was decided by controversial collisions. Fans argued, teams fumed, the press went nuclear. It was ugly. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was peak Formula One. But the 1990s had its own game changer, technology. The team to beat now was Williams, and their weapon, active suspension. It made the car basically drive itself through corners. Nigel Mansell used it to dominate in '92. Alain Prost returned in '93 to do the same. It looked like Williams would rule forever. But then, 1994 happened. You don't forget a weekend like that. San Marino. The entire F1 world gathered in Imola, and what followed was absolute tragedy. Saturday, rookie Roland Ratzenberger dies during qualifying. His steering column fails, he hits the wall. And just like that, one of the greatest drivers to ever live is gone. The world froze. Even people who didn't follow F1 knew Senna. He was a hero in Brazil, a myth everywhere else. His death shattered fans, drivers, and teams alike. Formula One had flirted with death for decades. That weekend, it paid the price. F1's bosses, the FIA, basically said, enough is enough. Safety wasn't optional anymore. Helmets changed. Cockpits were reinforced. Medical teams got faster. Circuits were redesigned. And while the sport would never be safe, it would never again be that reckless. The rest of 1994 still had a championship to decide, and it ended just as dramatically. Michael Schumacher versus Damon Hill. Final race. Australia. Schumacher crashes into the wall. Damage. Game over? Not quite. As Hill tries to pass, Schumacher crashes into him too. Both are out. Schumacher wins the title, controversially. He'd try the same trick in 1997 against Jacques Villeneuve, and that time, the FIA booted him out of the standings. But make no mistake, Schumacher was a beast. By the early 2000s, Formula One had found its first true emperor. Michael Schumacher and Ferrari went on a 5-year rampage, 2000 to 2004, destroying the field. In 2002, they scored so many points, the rest of the grid may as well have been on tricycles. It wasn't just domination, it was clinical, terrifying efficiency. Ferrari had the money, the brains, the driver, and nobody could stop them. Well, almost nobody. Enter a Spanish prodigy, Fernando Alonso. With Renault, he did the impossible. In 2005 and 2006, he broke Ferrari's chokehold and became the youngest double world champion ever. At the same time, a new team with an unusual logo was creeping onto the grid, Red Bull Racing. They bought out Jaguar, slapped an energy drink logo on the car, and laughed at the haters. But behind the party boy image was real talent, and they were just getting started. Meanwhile, McLaren was plotting a comeback. In 2007, they signed Alonso and a rookie named Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, that Lewis Hamilton. You weren't supposed to take him seriously yet, he was just a new kid, a wild card. But by the end of his first season, he nearly won the title. Let that sink in, his first year, and he was fighting veterans to the final race. He barely missed it. Kimi Raikkonen stole it for Ferrari in the last round. But the writing was on the wall. Hamilton wasn't just good, he was next. In 2008, Hamilton roared back and grabbed the title in the final corner of the final lap of the final race. He was now the youngest world champion ever, and a star was born. But F1 being F1, the rules changed again. In 2009, a team nobody saw coming, Braun GP, showed up with a cheat code. Their car exploited a loophole in the new regulations. Jenson Button won 6 of the first 7 races and cruised to the title. Just like that, Braun went from nothing to champions, then sold the team to Mercedes. Remember them? The same Mercedes that walked away from racing in 1955? Yeah, they were back. And they were angry. In 2014, new hybrid engine rules kicked off what we now call the turbo-hybrid era, and Mercedes was light years ahead. Their car was fast, reliable, and unbeatable. Hamilton, now racing in silver, unleashed fury. Between 2014 and 2020, he won everything. The only man to break the streak? His teammate Nico Rosberg in 2016. And Rosberg, he quit immediately after. Like a man who conquered Everest and said, "Yeah, I'm good." Then came 2021. You couldn't write a better script. Hamilton versus Max Verstappen. Fire versus ice. The old king versus the hungry prince. They clashed all season. Collided. Fought. Refused to back down. It all came down to one lap in Abu Dhabi. The safety car pulled in. Race control made a split decision, and Verstappen passed Hamilton in the final seconds to win the title. Fair? Rigged? Fans are still arguing. But what's undeniable, a new era had begun. In 2022, Red Bull came back with a monster of a car. Verstappen dominated with 15 wins, breaking records and silencing doubters. As of now, he's still in the driver's seat, literally. From open fields in France to billion-dollar battles in Abu Dhabi, Formula One has never just been about cars. It's about risk, genius, heartbreak, and glory. If you love this ride through F1 history, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this video with someone who needs to feel the roar of the engine. See you on the next lap.